Hello, everyone. Hi, Karin. Thank you so much for joining me for this call today. I'm so excited you're here. And to everyone who's watching and listening, I'm so excited that you're joining us. Karin is a Danish artist, author, psychologist, and psychotherapist, and expressive arts therapist. And we worked together a couple times already to create two versions of this beautiful oracle deck. We did the Danish version first, and last year we worked together again to create the English version. And so on this call today, we wanted to talk a little bit more about the process, what it's been like to create this deck. And I'm also going to ask Karin some questions about her work and basically just what inspired her to birth this deck into the world. So I'm super excited. And thank you so much for joining me today, Karin.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Such a joy.
Likewise. So the first question I have for you is, how did you get started on your journey with expressive arts therapy in general? What was that journey like for you? And also, what are some of the things that really fascinate you about this form of therapy? And why do you think creativity is so healing?
Oh, I love that question. So how I got started was really, being quite lost in what to do with my life. And I literally one day, I have a very lovely aunt who lives in the States, and she came to visit once. This is my dad's sister, and she had brought a book with, I think, graduate schools in the United States. And I'd always had this dream to go to the States, and for some reason I opened the book, and I opened it on the page. It said expressive arts therapy at CIIS in California. And something just, it sounds like it's too good to be true, but that's really what happened. I looked at it and I thought, oh, but there it is. And I'd been searching and trying different fields of study, and what that I think it's, I had always been interested in art. I always, played music. I have, I sung in choirs. I did ballet. I was always, a visual artist since I was a little kid, and a writer. And psychology, therapy, philosophy always interested me in personal development. And so just knowing that that existed was just wonderful. And I couldn't resist it. I just had to do it. And the other part of your question, I think, is really interesting, because what is it about? What is it exactly about creativity that is healing? Because it doesn't just happen when you make art. It doesn't have to be healing, right? It's not any kind of art. So I think there's a way that, when we make art intentionally, we can access layers of the psyche that we can't reach with words, because the way we perceive the world before we have words is through the senses, through these sounds and movements and smells and all this good stuff. So when we're engaging in the arts for a therapeutic purpose, we can access these deeper layers of both, I would say, of our brain, but also, in my language, I would say the soul. And it's very powerful. So my experience is for myself, and also with my clients, when a lot of times people come in and they have a story about what's going on with them. Oh, but I have low self-esteem, or I have this and that. And we discover that while that might be true in a sort of conceptual way, there's something much deeper going on that only their images, their songs, their dance can really tell us about. So there's a way that it touches the deepest, the core of our issues, but it also touches our strength, our resources, our beauty, all at the same time. So that's my short version of, I could keep talking about this.
Yeah, I love what you shared here. And This is something I've been thinking about a lot on my journey too, and kind of something that's come up for me many times because I'm a creative person too, and I've been on this journey for a long time. But
Yeah.
I mean, not a therapist, or I don't really have much experience with art therapy or anything like that. But one thing I've always noticed on my journey is when I feel stuck or kind of low energy or down, like often it really helps to do anything creative as long as it's inspired by my soul.
Mm.
And if it's really, inspired in any way. So um, the way I see it is, and that's maybe just another aspect. I feel like it reconnects us with our creator within, basically
Yes, yes,
our higher being, our higher consciousness as well. So
yeah,
that's kind of where everything comes together, and all the lost pieces of our soul come back together. So maybe
beautiful.
that's just another way of seeing it, but I really love what you shared, and I think it makes so much sense. Also, one thing I was contemplating when you were talking, I mean, often when we talk about, I mean, any kind of healing, or also like in the self-help world, often we might want to use that approach where we go digging and we try to understand, where our blocks are coming from, or, what the underlying patterns are. But I feel with art, um, and this kind of therapy, you don't even really need to know. It's like your soul just kind of naturally speaks that language, and processes whatever needs to be looked at and healed. Would you say that is true? Is it like a really natural process that just kind of happens however it wants to and
I
needs
think,
to?
yes, I think so. I think that was beautifully said. I think as long as we guide it and nurture it and create, I guess, a frame or enough safety to allow it to happen. So that can come through a connection to another person, a therapist, or even in a collaboration like ours. Like you held a space for me to create these so that my soul could speak, right? Or um, also, the other thing I wanted to say was when you mentioned the word inspiration, I think of that quite literally, that you talked about creating from inspiration, that it's a way of taking in spirit, right? It's a way of and when we take in spirit in whatever way we do it, through nature or through making art, then there's something to express, and then the soul can speak from that place. That's how I see it. And it is really natural. And it's quite it's just always a surprise what comes. And it's a surprise to people, to everyone, and sometimes people will ask me, does it ever get dull, to sit with people day in and day out? And I no, because it's always new. And it's the soul that takes us there. Like, I just feel like I'm just trying to listen to the person's soul and trying to follow that.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I see that every time I create something too. And back in the days when I was still creating art for Oracle decks for my clients, that's always how I experienced it. I mean, I kind of had a vision, but then what flowed through was always a surprise. Like,
Yeah.
it's nothing I could have guessed would come through. And it's like this channeling process too. And
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. I mean, that's kind of what my journey's been all about for the past 10 years or so, just allowing spirit to manifest through me. And it's so
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah, it is really fun. It really is. And I was just
Yeah,
thinking,
so,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was jumping ahead, but
Mm-mm.
the next question, basically, I wanted to ask you a bit more about your journey with the deck itself. So, what inspired you to create this deck? Like, when did you first get the inspiration to create this deck? And what was that process like for you, from getting that first nudge to actually putting it into action?
Right. That's such a good question. I think the first thing I want to say, it was such a long process until I met you. And that sort of got the process on track in a totally different way. We can talk about that later, I guess. But the process of giving birth to the idea, or sort of just conceiving of them, I would say. And it's similar to what I said before. It came at a time where I was pretty lost. I had been sick. I was in a very dark place, really. And I was seeking out all these different healers and all these different modalities. And I still wasn't really getting better. So I literally asked for help. And it was that. And I literally received this idea. Of course, I had seen many card decks when I lived in California, which I did for many years. And I always loved them. I just thought they were wonderful. And I had quite a few decks myself. But I asked for help. And then the idea came quite clearly to me, make a deck of cards. And then because I had been studying with so many people and I was such a seeker, I felt like I had so much to say that wasn't necessarily all my own stuff, but I just wanted to organize it in some way that could be digestible for people. Also with this idea that maybe I could help someone else who had been in a long crisis to have an easier go of it than I had. And yeah, so it all came together in that way. And I sat outside in nature one day and had the idea for how I was going to structure it and write it all down. And I started writing. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And I literally had stacks of books and papers and all of that. And it wasn't until right before we started connecting that I figured out just how to organize it, really. How to really organize it, and then things came together quite quickly from that point. But it was all very intuitive. I couldn't tell you exactly like what the steps were. It just came to me. And another thing, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
That's a sign that it's an inspired idea and that it really needs to happen.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it literally felt like this inner pressure. This metaphor that James Hillman talks about, the acorn, the pressure the acorn feels to become an oak. It was that kind of pressure, and like this deeply frustrated state and highly creative state of wanting so badly to create this, but not knowing exactly how. But then just at a certain point, I learned, okay, so this deck is definitely happening, because it kept coming back to me. And I started, this is going to sound a little crazy, but I think it actually really works. I started asking the deck in the future what it wanted from me and what next steps to take. And it was, it helped me a lot. And that's how I found you. And that's how I came up with, the structure of the cards and the colors for them and what images to use and the whole thing.
That's so perfect. I love when this kind of magic happens. And that's always the intention that I set for all of my projects too. And I love when clients find me that way too. I always feel like, when we feel stuck, it's the best thing we can do is just ask for the answers and the help and the guidance and everything. And it can come so easily and naturally. When we can allow that, then it supports the process so much.
It does.
Yeah. So now I'd love to hear a little bit more about the creative process of creating the deck itself after you found me while we worked together. So what was that like for you? And what would you say were some of the things that you really enjoyed, and maybe also some challenges that you worked through either before we got started or along the way? And how did the work we did together help you through that as well? So anything you feel inspired to share really about that process.
Yeah. The best thing I think initially, and maybe the whole way through about our work together, was this experience of finally being somebody getting it. like really getting it. Not just, I mean, a lot of people would get the idea of creating a deck, and it's not a new idea, right? But the way that you embraced the whole project, and that you could see that it could really become something, that it could work, this idea, because it's a little bit different than other decks that I'd seen in the way that it's created and structured. And so it was that feeling of being, there's some, we talked about frames before and about safety. There's something about that that helped me sort of calm down enough to just get to work, because it was such, I described it before as a kind of frustration. It was a frustrated, anxious place of not knowing how for such a long time. Literally, I think it took me 7 years or something to make all the image, all the words and the images and all that. And once we started talking, there was just this way that I could feel my entire system just settling down and knowing, okay, she gets it and she's holding the process now. So I could just focus on letting things come through me. And I think that's what you and I in our shared language would call, that's when the soul starts to be able to speak. I think that was the main thing. And then the whole way, like, I looked the other day at how many emails you and I have written, and it's so, and it's, when I look at it, I think like, oh my God, I mean, would I have done it if I'd known how much work this was? And yes, definitely, because it's funny, because we have a time difference, big time difference between us, 9 hours, I think, or something. And I always look forward, I can be totally tired from my day, and I always look forward to opening my email and seeing what you're going to send to me. So I think there's something deeply nourishing about us having the shared understanding and shared language. And I really felt like you really wanted this as almost as much as I did, or you probably did as much, but
I
in a
did.
different. Yeah. And that was just something I hadn't experienced before in that way. So it's very precious. And then so that's sort of the soul perspective. And then you had all these technical skills and publishing skills and all this other very down-to-earth stuff that was challenging for me. So that combination was just very effective. It made it happen. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that feedback. And I love hearing that, basically the support on all levels. And one thing I want to say is it's really important to me to work with clients who, I feel 100% yes when we start working together. I just really resonate, and I feel excited about the project, because if I don't, then it's not going to be a fun process for either of us. And I haven't done that very many times, like a few times maybe. I didn't listen to my soul, and then I took on a project that just wasn't a fit, or I mean, there were maybe some shadow things to work through. But
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, those are experiences that ultimately help us grow too. But that's definitely, I mean, for me also the ideal situation where I feel there is like a soul connection and a synergy between our processes. And then there is so much magic that can happen way beyond just, creating the physical product itself. But I think the other thing that you mentioned too, I mean, creating an Oracle deck is so much work, and there's so much that goes into it beyond just creating the art and the design and all the writing. I mean, producing the deck and publishing it. I mean, there's so many moving pieces. So I can see, I mean, for me, it took me like 10 years to figure out all the pieces, and it's just been one step at a time, learning by doing. But if you've never done it before, and it's like a totally new thing, and the creative process itself, I mean, it takes a lot of energy and processing And if you then have to figure out all the other pieces too, I think if you have someone who can provide that, then it's just going to be a lot easier for you to focus on
Yeah,
the things that are basically your zone of genius, and then you can just flow much more effortlessly. So
exactly.
I
I love.
love hearing that feedback. Um,
Yeah, I wanted to, there's another piece, if that's okay, to
mm,
that. I was remembering also, because you asked about challenges too, and I think the major challenge for me was just feeling insecure about the whole thing. And that insecurity took up a lot of space, and it still comes up. Even after now I've gotten hundreds of feedback from hundreds of people, and it's very nourishing and awesome, and it does help, but it can come up. And I think you just had a really firm way of just sort of like, nope, this is how we're going to do it. When I had a million questions, I would get stuck. And you would say something gentle like, it's quite common right at the end before it's published to start to doubt the entire thing and want to change everything over.
it's true. It happens for almost everyone, myself included. Those are just some of the patterns that I've seen so many times with the creative process. I mean, it's just usually around the beginning or maybe right before we start, there tends to be a certain amount of resistance. And I mean, it depends. Like now, also, because I've been on this journey for quite a long time now, doing this for clients. I mean, I've been doing this for 4 years now. I feel like because I have way less resistance to receiving new projects than, I mean, it usually flows easier for my clients too. But usually towards the end, just when always before the big breakthroughs, really. I mean, that when the big manifestation happens and it's ready to ground into the physical, I
Yeah,
mean, that's typically when our
yeah,
little shadows or
yes,
whatever. I mean, perfectionism is a typical one that
yeah,
tends to come up.
yeah.
Um,
Yes, I like that. It's typical. I think about rituals too. There's this final phase of any
mm,
ritual where we're kind of in this liminal place, this betwixt and between, where you don't quite know, and you don't know who you are and what you're going to be past, you know, what's coming here. And it's so important to feel held there, and also to feel listened to, because it wasn't, maybe I didn't say that quite clearly, because you were firm, but you also would listen to my concerns and respond to me and not shame me for it in any way when I had some very particular little thing like, how about we move this 1 millimeter to the left? You would take it seriously also, while helping me to move along. So
yeah, and I totally get it. I mean, I'm a perfectionist too, so those are typically the things that I do when I work on a project for myself. I mean, I'm way worse than any of my clients, I think.
that's
How,
great.
like, with how, yeah, perfectionistic I can get with little details. And in a project or a collaboration like this, I mean, it's just easier to kind of keep an eye on being efficient and and just seeing things from maybe more of an outside perspective too. Then it's easier for me to see if, let's say, someone's, I mean, seeing something that really needs to be adjusted, or maybe it's just some perfectionism or resistance coming up. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's just something I've seen a lot. Um, Often, let's say when we're in the middle of the creative process, I feel that's when we're really connected usually to our inner voice and our inner guidance, and we can see very clearly how it needs to be structured. And what can sometimes happen towards the end is, oh, all of a sudden I want to change everything and I think it's not good enough, or then
yeah,
most of the time it's more of an ego concern that just tries to stop us from moving forward, and it's
yeah,
really just the fear of the next level, stepping into our greatness. But I think
yeah.
it's important to honor, though, whatever comes up, and
I
listen
think,
to that.
yeah,
Mm,
that inspires me to say something about, I think when this kind of resistance comes up, or this self-judgment and insecurity, is often a form of, and now this is the psychologist talking, right? But it's a form
mm,
of self-protection, right?
it
Because we're
is. Mm,
afraid, the way that we've been wounded, criticized or made to feel not good enough is going to come up. And this inner part of us just wants to take care of us and protect us from putting ourselves out there. But there's a way. So there's a real push at the end there to push past that and do it anyway. Because at the end, you can see, okay, so this isn't, it isn't perfect. Even after all the work, there's always something that could be better, of course, and but to finish it, so you have to tolerate that and trust that there's enough that's beautiful and good, and it's going to help people, that you get it done.
And that's very true. I think at some point it's just, you just need to get it done. Like, done is better than perfect, because we can never make it completely perfect.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good attitude, just seeing, this deck or this product or whatever we're creating can help so many people. And if I don't complete it, then it's just going to be here and not helping
Yeah.
anyone. So
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah.
Mhm.
So another question I have for you is, how has this process of creating this deck helped you grow in business and as a person, and or as a person? Again, whatever you feel inspired to share.
A lot, in a lot of different ways. So I think they're connected, because to do this, there's so much I had to learn about, and you did a lot of the stuff, but I had to sort of keep up and understand about the editing and the graphic design and the technical, all the things on the computer. And there's so much there that I learned, to kind of to still feel connected to the project. And that was important to me. So there's a lot of growth there that I can see now. It's so much easier for me, that right now I'm obsessed with Instagram and getting that to work. And a lot of it I can do now because of what I learned through the process. So it's much easier for me than before. And that has given me a lot more confidence in putting my work out there, and not, there's nothing wrong with this, but I think I tended to be a teacher of other people's work before, which I still love to do. That's great. But to kind of becoming more confident in my own offerings and things that are unique to me, and putting that into the world, and trusting that it's enough. It's not for everybody, but it's for a group of people who really want to hear that. So that's been a huge growth at a personal level and business level for me. And now my whole focus is on marketing, which is something I've shared this with you before. Like, I really disliked it intensely, that part before, like, really. And I think I'm just learning that the marketing piece is quite important, because it's about standing by what we've created here, and it's about trusting that it's here for a reason, and it is for other people. It's not just for myself. I'm creating it, and then just putting one foot in front of the other and learning the stuff. So yeah, I had to learn it if I want to put it out there. If I don't want to just sell to my best friends, which is wonderful, but that wasn't the idea when you order 500 decks or 1,000 decks or something. You have to get it out to a wider audience, and also it's so much more satisfying. So that requires me to learn all the different steps and the technical skills and all of that. So does that make sense? The kind of
Yes, it makes so much sense. And thank you so much for sharing that, because that is actually, I think, a really important piece. And also, I think you do a really great job with your marketing and putting yourself out there. And that is something, that I've also seen as a pattern, especially when I first got started on this journey with myself too. And still something I struggle with at times for other reasons, because I have my own other little patterns with always, putting everybody else's work first. And with my own decks, I definitely have to work on my marketing. And so that's, just a side note. But also with clients, I've seen it quite often. And I think it's kind of a pattern that a lot of us creatives tend to have, because we love the creative process, and then yeah, we've created this thing and then I just want to go and create the next thing right away, rather than actually putting myself out there and showing
I,
up and being visible. And I think the way you explain this is really beautiful, and that's exactly what it is. So, I mean, the marketing piece is a whole other level of working through any resistance we might have. And that's often when the really, scary stuff, I don't want to make it sound too dramatic, comes up, but those
yeah,
are, the fears of being visible, and what you
yeah,
mentioned earlier about that part of us that wants to protect us, right? So I think it takes a lot of commitment and dedication into the process, and also being connected to your sense of purpose
yeah,
behind, why you created this.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and then again, once again, I love how you said it. Once again, being connected to these, and asking them how, what's my next step, being committed to that process. And I find myself coming back to that when I'm getting a little lost in something I'm finding difficult or something, and just being, listening to the project itself about how it wants to come into the world, and how it wants to be, yeah, distributed, and how it wants to be talked about in on social media, whatever. And not feeling like I have to come up with some fancy marketing strategy, which isn't really my thing, right? And probably not your thing either, but just trusting that these cards want to say something through me. And um and so marketing them is about connecting to the people who want to hear that. That's all it really is. It's about connecting to people with a message, you know.
so perfect how you said that. I couldn't say it any better. And I think that's really the essence of what it is. And you're so right. I mean, especially when it comes to marketing, there are so many possibilities. I mean, there's so many ways you can put your deck out there, and so many possibilities to play with. So I think what's most important is always finding what works best for you. And often when we allow that, then it just flows really naturally too. And we very naturally develop the processes that support us best on this journey. And I
Yeah.
think it's really helpful to set that intention very consciously. I mean, we don't really want to be in a place where we're just putting in so much effort and with very little payoff, because then again, the deck is not getting out there. It's not really helping anyone. So the focus really needs to be on making it as easy and efficient as possible, so you can do the work that, I mean, I think the marketing, of course, also helps people, and it's part of the work too, but beyond that, I mean, you have so much more to offer too, and you don't want to be on social media 24/7. Well, you could be doing other things too that are important. So
Yeah.
um one other question I have for you, and you already kind of answered it, but I would love to hear it maybe in a bit of a more condensed form if you can. What do you think is the special magic of your deck? What makes it unique, and how does it really help the people that work with it?
Thank you. Well, one thing that has become really clear to me is that what's different about these cards is that they don't give answers. They're about helping you find your own answers. And I mean that quite literally. And it was definitely my intention, but I didn't see how real that was till people started asking me questions about how to use the cards. That it really is about setting in motion, inspiring you and helping you connect to your creativity. So the cards were created through creativity and through listening to that inner voice and finding those answers. And and so that's what I'm trying to pass on through the cards. I want to awaken that in the people who own them and use them. that they can find that creativity and create from that place, and then that goes into the world and creates more goodness. So it's I think to some people it's a more, anyway, I don't know if this is true, but it could be a more challenging deck in a sense, because it requires you to really sit with something and do your own work, sit down and do a drawing or do that dance or go into the woods or whatever it is. That was my initial thought, that it would be a little more demanding of people. But what I've heard is people say it's actually just, they get inspired in the same way they do with other cards. You could just look at a card and not have to do anything particular, but just take it in as a kind of soul nourishment and inspiration. So in that sense, they're similar. But I think the magic in them is this sort of, it feels like it's a blueprint I was given from somewhere else, and it passes that on to people to find some kind of blueprint for finding their own voice, really. And I think what's shared by a lot of people who use the cards, and by a lot of my clients and myself, of course, is these are people who have somehow have had their voices shut down, who've had some sort of trauma. I'm not saying that you get trauma therapy from the cards, it's not that, but some sort of trauma, or some sort of, it could be through bullying or something even worse. Like, yeah, I won't get into that too much, but it's really about finding your own voice in the world and finding your own ways of nourishing yourself, ways of healing yourself in a very, very personal way.
That's actually something I really love about this deck, that you can definitely use it like you would use any other Oracle deck and just pull a card for inspiration. And sometimes that might be all you need, but that's definitely something I really appreciate about the content of the book. You put so much effort and work into writing this book. I'll just take it out of the box very quickly.
Right.
Yes. It's not, the typical kind of book that you would usually find with the average Oracle deck. First of all, it's pretty long. It's 170 pages. And I feel like you've put so much into it in terms of helpful tools and practices that you've probably developed in your own journey, and also that you have from your professional background. And that's something that I personally found really helpful when I was editing the book. And I got so much inspiration from all those creative exercises and tools, and thought, oh, this is going to be really fun to put into practice. I can't wait to work with this deck. So I think that's definitely something that makes it special and unique, and that I would encourage anyone who works with this deck to really embrace and take advantage of. So it's not just like any other deck, because it is your magic. That is what really makes it unique, right?
Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me. That's another thing I could share, just that I had this amazing process of working with my dad my dad's a writer, and I had thought that he wasn't going to be into all the spiritual magic-y creative exercises stuff, but he was so into it, and we just had the best, most nourishing, deep, persistent, awesome communication about this, and just worked through it was so inspiring. So there was also like a real bonding and almost healing. It was just it's really, really something special that he became a co-editor of the booklet too. So
that's so beautiful. And I think we always draw in the connections, that we need while we work on anything creative too, that helps us work through whatever we need to work through internally as well. And maybe in connection with this deck and what you're stepping into, maybe there was some healing in that relationship that needed to happen too. So I think that's really beautiful when that kind of magic just happens and it just shows itself naturally.
Yes.
and also knowing that you have the support, you have all the support you need.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I love how this approach, your approach to it, that, you know, the card is a kind of, it's almost like I'm hearing you speak about it. It's a kind of school. Like there's all these steps, things to learn and things to heal through the creation of them. And they're giving us whatever we need to work on, you know, so it's a lot of growth from making one of these.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So now I thought it would be fun to maybe pull some cards, and you suggested doing a joint reading, which I really love. So why don't we each pull a card for our audience and then see what messages want to come through
That's
for
great.
both of us.
Okay, just a sec here. Yeah.
So I'm asking for the message that will most benefit everyone watching this video. What do we all need to know right now for our highest good? Okay, I've got mine.
I
Do you
got
have
one
yours?
too.
Aw. Hey, this is kind of a sad one, but I'll just start with this one, then I'm curious to see what you got. So I got the sorrow card.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's very interesting because you know what I got? I got shadow.
That's a nice combination.
Yeah. Do you want to say something about your? Because
Yeah, I'm just gonna tune in intuitively very
yeah,
quickly. So one thing that came up for me right away is just when I was looking at the card actually here on my screen, I noticed the tears.
yeah.
And so one thing that I'm feeling intuitively, it's really about releasing the resistance to any of the heavy feelings that we might be processing right now. So what can sometimes happen on this journey is when, there's past sadness maybe that comes up or that is hidden and that we need to release so we can step into our next level and basically just release the resistance to manifesting whatever wants to come through next. I'm just feeling that softening that happens when we allow ourselves to feel what we've been suppressing and what we're not allowing ourselves to feel. Sometimes those really heavy feelings can feel so heavy because we're not allowing ourselves to feel them. And when we allow ourselves to open and just let it flow, then it softens and it just becomes like this healing, like almost like a medicine that
Yeah.
helps us find the comfort within and also reconnect on all
Mm,
levels with our own soul and with the people in our lives as well. And it just opens up that channel of support. So
mm.
that's what's coming through for me. Now I can't
Oh,
wait to hear what you have to say.
well, that was so beautiful. I'm glad you're taping this. I can hear you say that again. Well, for me, it seems like they're really deeply related because the first thought and intuition that came to me was that they're both about reintegrating what's been rejected and pushed away. And there's so much of shadow and sorrow right now in our world, right? And so how do we work with that in a context like this that's about creativity, and other words we use, magic and healing and all of that? And I think it's really, I'm kind of glad that we pulled those two cards because I think that's at the core of what the cards are about. They're really about taking back parts of us that have been lost. And see, that's how they were created too, because I had lost the creative part of myself and lost my way, sort of like lost my way in the woods. And to come back from that and to create something, it requires that journey into the underworld. That's I think, shared shamanic wisdom and wisdom from mythology and so on. That when we at certain points we have to take that journey, but also there are gifts that come from that. And I think that's what you were saying too. And I think the way that we've been treating ourselves and the planet is symptomatic of rejecting those sides. And I think this is the time to integrate all of that and to take back those parts of ourselves, because I think that's the only way we can come through this stage we're at.
Mm, yeah, this
Yeah.
is so beautiful. And I've actually been thinking about this a lot. And there was a time when I was feeling really pulled down by everything that was happening on this planet. I mean, first the pandemic, and then what's going on in Ukraine, and has been for, I think, more than a year now already. And there was a time when this was really pulling me down, and I was starting to wonder, like, what can I do? Like, what can I do to help? And what can we all do ultimately? Because I mean, it's not just me or you, it's everyone on this planet. And I always see when a crisis happens that affects everyone on a global level, it is something that we need to address as a collective too. So one thing that came to me was, I mean, first of all, as you know, I can look at what's happening and take that as my own reflection, and see, like, what is it triggering within me, or what is it reflecting back to me about what I can heal within myself. And when we all do that individually, then we support the collective in that process too. And another thing that also came to me, and I think that's maybe part of my personal journey, that's always kind of been, I think, important for me as someone who's really sensitive, and I think a lot of us listening can relate to this as well. We tend to take on a lot of the pain of the world, and how can we kind of move beyond that and not feel responsible,
Yeah.
so much for all the pain, and need to carry it. Like, how can we find the joy in that process or within ourselves, even as we're still working on these challenges collectively? Like, how can we, and that, I think that's ultimately what it's all about, because when we can transform whatever is feeling heavy within ourselves, and find that joy within ourselves again, we've actually integrated a lot of those
Mm,
pieces, and
mm,
then that reflects back into the world, and
yeah.
then we can go out into the world and smile at people, and everybody feels uplifted. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yes.
what I've been contemplating recently.
Yeah. I can feel that as you shared that. And I was thinking about where you started out with the tears. And I think it comes through, we can only start the process you're talking about, that maybe we're both talking about, through surrendering to those feelings and somehow creating enough, we're back to that again, enough safety, for ourselves, that we can cry and we can feel at a deep level in a way that feels safe to us, and then it can be released, and then there's some kind of renewal that can happen. But it's so, I'm really fascinated by this reading, because those are the only two kind of dark cards in the whole deck, and it's so interesting that we both had both those. This feels very important.
That is really interesting. I was actually wondering, I mean, there are definitely, I mean, some of the shadow energies in this deck too, because it makes sense as a healing deck, but I didn't actually consider that it was the two only darker cards in that sense.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. But you're right, I'm just looking through them now, and all of the others have, I mean, a much lighter energy actually.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I love what came through here, and I think it's so relevant for all of us right now. And we can, I mean, we can feel so lost when we see everything that's happening in the world, and we feel so powerless, and we feel like we can't do anything. But actually, every crisis that manifests, I mean, it is an opportunity ultimately to work through our own shadows and our collective shadows. And
Yeah.
I think in the past several years, it's been so much about, I mean, finding, I mean, a lot of it has had to do with authority, like from the outside, and the world leaders and how we feel affected. And I think it's a lot about reclaiming our own authenticity and our own authority and our voice too, which you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
about the magic of this deck.
Yeah. And I think it's only, just going back to what we talked about insecurity and not feeling good enough to put something into the world and all of that. I think for maybe for a lot of us who are here listening or talking here, that's the shadow part, is this insecure, collapsed part of us that doesn't even dare to go into the world and wants to, hide somewhere out in the woods or something. And our power comes
That's
back
me.
to it. Yeah, me too.
Hiding in the woods. That's my favorite thing.
I see your post. I'm like, yeah, I get it. you know. Um, so there's power in connecting to that shadow part, because it's only when we own that there's that we don't have to be so afraid of other people seeing that part of us when we sort of embrace it. I've been studying recently. I've been fascinated by Phil Stutz. I don't know if you saw it. There's a documentary on Netflix about his very not controversial, but sort of his very unique way of working with therapy. And one tool that he uses is about really connecting to your own shadow in a very practical way, and how it helps people become more creative and more secure when they're presenting or in the middle of an interview or something. So it's interesting because I did that right before we got on the call. So yeah, it makes a lot of
Mm.
sense.
One thing I love about this deck too, and about your work and your style, is you actually have a really humorous way of approaching the shadows too. I mean, there's so many moments when I was editing the guidebook when I just had to chuckle, and I just loved the way you kind of had this humorous view on our shadows. And there's so many pieces of ourselves and experiences that I think all of us will be able to recognize.
Mhm.
And so that was a really beautiful part of that process too. And I think just helps to make, it's a serious topic, but it doesn't have to be so serious. We can approach it in a playful way.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciated hearing it. I wasn't aware of that as I was writing it. So I was really happy when you wrote that, when
Mm.
you wrote that to me, that I like that. It helps a lot,
Mm.
right? Being able to laugh at things, it helps a lot.
Mm. And I mean, it's this beautiful balance of a really soft and gentle energy, and then a little bit of dark humor too, which I really like. I mean, some of it is just hilarious.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's time to start wrapping up this call. But before we do, is there anything else that you feel inspired to share that you think our audience needs to hear? You're either about the deck or anything else that's coming up for you.
I was just noticing just now, because we were talking about these two darker cards, and it's interesting because I pulled it again now. I tried to see what happens if I pull card one more time, and I just pulled the same card twice, which is an inspiration card. This one. And the inspiration cards you and I developed um, to help people. They're really that there's it's really about completely trusting the creative process. So I think that's the message I want to invite people into, right, to hearing right now, to trust their creative process, and that can guide them into their next steps. Did you want to read from it looked like you were looking for you want to say
Oh, I
something?
was just looking for some inspiration cards here in my deck,
Yeah.
but here's another one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so there are several. Are there 4 inspiration cards and 4 rituals, I think? That
Exactly.
kind of invite you to create your own process and then follow whatever comes through
Yeah.
for you. So this
Yeah.
is another really beautiful and creative way to work with the deck. Um, yeah, so I think last question, where can we find you? Where can we find the deck? And learn more about your work. And then I'll share some last words after that.
Thank you so much. Well, the best way is to connect with me through my website is karinvondaler.com. So we can probably put it in a link somewhere, but it's just my name.
Yes, I'll link down below.
Yeah, .com. And from that's my main website. There's a link to my web shop where you could go and find the cards in Danish or in English. And also right now I'm doing a lot of different videos and fun things about the cards on Instagram. So that's another place if people like that channel. And my handles are at Karin von Daler Healing Arts is the main one. And then there's the one that's called at the Art of Self-Healing Card Deck. So
Yes,
those
and
to reach me.
we can link those down below as well. So
yeah,
it'll be easy for you to find them.
Yeah.
And there's also a bit more information about the deck on my website, which is wonderlandpublishing.net. You can also find the link to all the wholesale information where you can buy the deck there as well. And
good point. Yeah.
So if you go to my website and then go to products, you can find that there. Then if you're interested in my work and different ways of working with me, then you can find more information about on my website as well. And what I will say is I don't currently have a lot of space for done for you work because they just tend to fill up really quickly, but I have some new offers coming up. And right now I do have the self-study course as well that I will link down below. And if you're interested in any upcoming offers, you can sign up to my mailing list, which you'll find in the header on my website. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much again for joining me for this call today, Karin. It was so much fun. And I just love these conversations. It's so much better than any of us could do on our own.
Yeah, so inspiring.
So inspiring.
Yes,
exactly.
That word. That's great. And I just want to say to everybody, if you're considering working with Anna, anyway, go for it, because she's just an amazing guide in these creative processes. So
thank you so much. And thank you also for trusting me with this project. And it was just such a joy to bring to life with you. And I can't wait to see how the journey unfolds from here. I think there's so much more to come.
me too. Such a joy talking.